And when you're more effective at something and you do it more often, that's what exponential growth looks like. And so, what I really like doing is bringing that concept to salespeople, giving them the permission and the freedom to sell their own way so that they can, not only get better results, but also experience the fulfillment.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Campfire Capitalism podcast. And today we are talking about some sales with our boy, Jeff. So before we even start, sorry, I pronounce your last name is Bajorek. Is it Bajorek?
Bajorek, yeah.
Bajorek. Okay, cool. Just want to make sure that Bajorek. Bajorek.
You're good.
Bajorek.
Thank you.
Bajorek. Okay, cool. Jeff Bajorek.
You got it right. You got it right off the bat.
The first time I got to ask. I didn't want to butcher it and keep rolling, right? That's bad. Bajorek. Okay, cool. So 3, 2, 1. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Campfire Capitalism podcast. I'm your host, Desmond Dixon. And today we have an amazing guest to talk about some sales because we love to make money here at the Campfire. Welcome, Mr. Jeff Bajorek. This guy has an amazing podcast, a book. He's really well versed in the sales industry, and you should definitely go check out his podcast when it goes sideways. Go check him out. And Jeff, man, welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Desmond. Thank you.
Awesome. So, man. So before we even kind of get into some sales fundamentals, like you talk about a lot, let's talk about a little bit about like what your like sales philosophy is, and like how did like what your career look like? What kind of sales did you do? What kind of sales do you love to train people on?
Well, I think. It's interesting you say, what kind of sales I like to train people on. Selling is selling. And I don't care what industry you're in. I don't care what you sell. There are certain elements that need to occur. There are certain fundamentals you need to not forget. And, to me, it all comes down to, and I think where my career was really formed and where it really started to take off is this concept called, that I call sell like you. Desmond, I can't sell like you. You can't sell like me. And I think the more people get that point across to themselves, the more people recognize that, the better they're going to do. And everybody is looking for a template. They're looking for a guide. They're looking for a cookbook. They're looking for a recipe. And there are just no recipes in sales. There are some guidelines that you need to follow, right? There are certain boxes that absolutely need to be checked. But your words won't work for me because they're not mine. And I think salespeople are afraid to do things their own way because they just want to do things well. They just want to succeed. They just want to do a good job, and they want someone to tell them that they did a good job. And hopefully there's a commission check at the end of the day too. But once you kind of break out of that shell or that mold and feeling like you have to do it a certain way, you realize what things become possible. You start doing things in a way that are comfortable for you. That makes you more effective. That makes you more likely to do it. And when you're more effective at something and you do it more often, that's what exponential growth looks like. And so, what I really like doing is bringing that concept to salespeople, giving them the permission and the freedom to sell their own way so that they can, not only get better results, but also experience the fulfillment that comes along with solving other people's problems, being rewarded for solving those problems, and really just the good vibes and the energy that comes from helping other people.
Oh man, that landed. So many people definitely looks for those quick fixes, or I'm gonna read off this piece of paper and I'm gonna double my sales this month. So talk to me about that transformation, because what you're talking about really is like transforming the way someone thinks or approaches.
Yes.
Obviously the craft of selling. So talk to me about what does that transformation look like? Like how long does it usually take? And what are some of the signs that you see that someone's starting to make that transition as let's say as a manager or an executive listening to this?
Those are great questions. there's no firm timeline. I can't tell you it's going to happen in 90 seconds. I can't tell you it's going to happen in 90 days. You know what? And I've been doing this now 18 years, and I still learn something new every day. So it's a continuing, ever evolving kind of process. But what's funny is once you are open to changing your mind about, I can really do it my own way. I don't want to do it the way Desmond does it. I don't want to do it the way Jeff does it. I'm going to take what they're doing, right? I'm going to remind myself of the fundamentals. I'm going to take what they're doing. I'm going to then understand what needs to be done. I'm going to figure out my own best way to do it, which doesn't mean starting from scratch. It means just kind of being inspired by the templates rather than trying to put yourself in the templates. And we can dig into that a little bit later if you want. But then I'm going to put my own spin on things. And once you are open to that approach and you're willing to explore it, and that's the big jump, right? Where it's like, well, I don't know. I just want to be safe. People want to be safe. And when you talk about blazing your own trail, you talk about losing some of that safety. But the problem with that safety is that it is literally mediocrity. You are not going to perform at your best if you're performing the way everybody else is performing. You are not going to experience better than average results if you're using an average template or an average model or an average process. And so you really have to figure out where you fit in what you do. And that is the scary part. And that's where I give people permission, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't just tell them, well, look, you're leaving your best results on the table. You could be doing so much better. You have to break away from the mean, from the average, if you want to get the level of results and if you want to live and experience the promises that everybody made to you about a career as an entrepreneur or in sales. But they just want to be safe. They want the sure thing, and there's no such thing. And the other thing, and this is where you get into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and this safety. It's if I do it the way that someone told me, I should be able to experience reasonable results. If I just follow this 12-step plan, I will experience reasonable results. And if I don't experience reasonable results, it's not my fault, because all I did was exactly what I was told. So there is this safe area of, yeah, I'll do okay. And there's no downside because I have no ownership or responsibility over the outcome. And those concepts both fly in the face of the entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast, the top performing salespeople who want to experience the great heights of and fulfillment and excitement of a career as a top sales performer. But you don't realize that because our own human nature and our need for safety tends to override that. And so I give people permission to pursue their own path. I give people the know-how. I remind them of what is out there for them. I remind them of the current state they're stuck in right now, which is less than optimal. And then I help show them and encourage them along the way how to really maximize their own potential.
Man, that was gold. There's so much there I want to unpack, but I'm just going to pick one just for the sake of time, the money one.
Well, we got 20 more minutes, right? I mean, whatever you want to get into.
Man, so like what I heard you say, like in between the lines, right? Like is confidence, right? Like that self-confidence in yourself, because you talked about like putting yourself in the framework or, or like using pretty much like the framework as the tool. And so I want to get into this confidence side of things, because as you're like, personalizing and making it your own, some of the best sales guys in the world that I know are probably some of the most confident guys I know. They're not only confident within themselves, but they're confident that they can solve someone else's problem. That person can feel that energy, and it allows you to then use that framework and that process to make sure you keep that customer on the journey. So I want to ask you a question about like what your philosophy is around like a sales framework, and like then also like how confidence amplifies this framework or to really become a top sales performer or a big revenue maker.
I want to go a step further before I answer that question, and I haven't been able to clearly articulate it yet, but the feeling is there, and I think your listeners will appreciate it. I don't stop at confidence. I go to belief. Confidence is something that other people can give you. Confidence you can be propped up by. Belief, I think, comes from your soul. It comes from somewhere deep inside you. And you don't need confidence. I mean, of course, you need confidence, but confidence isn't enough. Belief is what you really need. And that belief manifests itself in a swagger. Right. And I call swagger kind of this impenetrable confidence or this exponential belief. And they're all kind of, like I said, I don't really know off the top of my head. I could look it up. I don't know that there is a tangible difference in the definition between confidence and belief, but there is an emotional difference between those terms. And that's why I go to belief. That belief that you know that you will succeed, that belief that you know that you're doing what is right for your customer, that they're better off for working with you than anyone else, that, and there are other good choices out there, but this is the right one, right? I think belief goes beyond the X's and O's. It goes beyond the tangible, logical data. It's something that is pure to your core. And that's what people need to strive for. As far as frameworks around selling, I've got several. I mean, we talked a little bit before we started recording here about objection handling. I've talked about and written about the 5 forgotten fundamentals of prospecting. I've got, but boiled down every sales process into 4 key elements. And if you have 17 elements in your sales process, you're probably looking at them the wrong way and being confused, right? There are only 4. So, where do you want to go with this, Desmond? And I guess what framework would you like me to specifically get into?
Okay, so I think objection handling is for sure, because to me as a sales guy, I feel like the sales process really doesn't start until you get to the objection handling part. When you're deep and when it's obviously there's a qualification, there's some buyer's intent, right? Like that's when I think beforehand you're just being a good human and being curious and things like, I mean, you probably have your own philosophy around it, but
yeah, we can argue about that later.
yeah, we can argue about that for sure. It's okay, apples and oranges, right? But so I'm really curious to kind of hear your take on objection handling, because I know that you had a really beautiful thing you told me offline, when we first met, and I was like, man, I vibe with that big time. So, let's unpack your methodology around objection handling, and then we can kind of unpack it more from there.
I think most people gear up to handle objections like they took a bunch of pre-workout and they're ready to run through a brick wall. And I think that it serves a purpose, but I think it also gets the relationship started on the wrong foot. If you're paying attention, an objection represents something or some place where you fell short in your value proposition. And the key to handling objections, overcoming objections. I mean, that's the thing that I don't like to look. These are objections. You need to overcome them. You need to get around them. You need to go over them. You need to go through that. However it is, like I understand, and I don't want this to be just a semantical discussion. Yeah. But think about overcoming objections and think about how often you've been trained as a seller to overwhelm the objection and to go after it with all kinds of data and logic. And let me tell you what you missed. And it's all about, you're really trying to override and make someone and convince someone. You're trying to make them think about things differently. But meanwhile, there's an emotional aspect to that objection that you haven't addressed. And people buy things emotionally. They justify them later logically. And the objection always comes from an emotional place. So if you don't address that emotion, it doesn't matter how much logic you're giving them, they're not going to meaningfully change their mind unless you literally beat them up, paint them into a corner, and give them no way out of the conversation, in which case your return rate is going to come up. Your customer satisfaction rate is going to be way down. Buyer's remorse is going to be much higher. And these people certainly are not going to refer you to their friends. So I don't think it's the best way to do this. If you are approaching sales negotiations the same way FBI hostage negotiators are, approaching, human rights crises, you're probably on the wrong path. You're probably, thinking about this the wrong way. It's not that it can't be effective, and there's no offense to the people who are, to Chris Voss, quite frankly, who wrote a great book about negotiating.
Yeah, never split the difference. Yeah,
I listened to it. It was great. It was sound. The guy, look what the guy did for a living, right? And now he treats or trains people on this kind of framework, and it's helpful for them in a lot of ways outside of sales too. I just choose not to approach it that way. And I think most people, particularly entrepreneurs, particularly people who want to make customers for life, they have to consider the basis on which that relationship is formed. And so instead of overwhelming objections, I take the opposite approach. I think you need to listen. That's why my framework is called EAR, E-A-R. You check your ego first. Where's this objection coming from? I know I'm incensed. I know I'm upset. I know I wanted them to say yes. They said no instead. Okay. Calm down for a second. Where's this coming from? So once you check your ego, okay, you can really be a little more clear-headed. You can approach this from a more stable, solid footing. And then what you need to do is acknowledge the issue. You need to calm their ego down. Desmond, I know you think this costs too much. I understand. Quite frankly, we know that we cost 20% more than everybody out there that you're comparing us to right now. But can we return, this is the third part, we return to the problem that you mentioned you were having? And is the problem not worth solving? And from there, it's going back into your differentiated value proposition, not pitching at them again, but going through and reestablishing the value that you and only you can provide. So you're returning back to the sales part. It could, because part of that acknowledgement of their issue is that you didn't provide enough value to solve their issue at that point. So it's EAR, E-A-R, ego, check your ego, acknowledge their problem, right? And then return to the problem that they're trying to solve. And I think it's a simple framework for people to remember. It's a means of de-escalating situations. And it is always returning back to the problem that they're having, not the problem you're having, right? Let's making objection handling about the prospect, not about the seller. And, I just don't think you return to the prospect's problem by saying, how am I supposed to do that? Right. Like, and that's my framework for it. I think it puts a lot more salespeople at ease. I think it, again, reestablishes you as someone who's calm, trustworthy, knowledgeable, and worth working with. And I just think it paves the way for so many more constructive, it's the word I'm looking for, constructive conversations where there's conflict, right? Because you're going to have conflict every good relationship has conflict in it. What is your template for making those conversations go well? It starts right from the beginning, right from that first objection that you mentioned.
Man, something I want to point out to the audience that I thought was really money was the fact that you stated the obvious with your EAR philosophy. I know that we're 20% more expensive, so let's talk about why we're talking right now, which is solving your particular problem. So it's almost like you're redirecting the attention from the logistical stuff to more of, hey, like, let's come to terms on, is this worth this problem worth being solved?
Right.
That's money. Dude, I was laughing when you mentioned Chris Voss's books. I was like, I read that book intentionally just to notice when other people are using this tactics on me.
Sure.
It's like, I learned that. So like, okay, all right, I know exactly your playbook. This is the reason why I'm a big fan of what you said with, like, not fitting yourself in the box. Obviously, you need frameworks, you need checklists, you need templates, you need to, have some type of structure in your communication, right? In any kind of business dealings. But I think business is like, business intelligence is recognizing patterns, right? Not only with customers, but also with your competition and things like that. And if mass people are using the same strategy to negotiate, you can use that as leverage because you know what they're going to, how predictable they are, right? So just there's some game for you guys just to listen to this, right? So let's unpack this a little bit more. And let's go a little bit deeper. Okay. So sure. I'm pretty curious to hear about this from you because you've been in the game for 18 years. I mean, you're doing trainings, workshops, you got a book. By the way, your book is called When It Goes Sideways. And then your podcast is actually called Rethink the Way You Sell. I know you have another podcast as well. So I got that confused, guys. So just links to the show.
All kinds of stuff out there. I'm not hard to find.
Dude, I love your newsletter too. So we'll talk about that stuff. But I'm really keen to take it one step further of I think real life, what are some of the most common objections that you see into the B2B space, right? And do you believe that a lot of some objections that come up because the way the beginning of the call was, or the beginning of the sales process was handled? Because you mentioned they're not seeing the value, or there's a something in the value space. So I'm pretty curious to hear the most common objection, you hear a lot in the industry in the B2B space. And then do you think that there's things that people can do better in the beginning of a call to make, the possibility of objections coming up less likely?
There really are only a handful of actual objections. There is price, there is fit, there is timing, there is we're happy with our current supplier, vendor, partner, whatever. Mm-hmm. But probably the biggest reason that most of those objections occur, particularly right up front, is a lack of context. Your prospect doesn't understand why your solution will help them accomplish what they want to accomplish. And the reason they don't have context, quite frankly, is because salespeople don't provide it. They also don't work very hard to create it. And so in order to provide it, it sounds like you have to give them 300 words on demonstrating that you understand their situation, illustrating their problem for them. This feels awkward. This feels weird. This feels like, wait, I just got on a cold call. They picked up the phone and I launched into 45 seconds before I even, said hello. So you don't want to do that. But you also can't launch right into a pitch either, because then you don't have the context. So when you pitch on a cold call, when you tell people about what your offer is and why you're calling so specifically, you're really just hoping that you're catching one of the 3 to 4% of people who are in the buying window at this time. That reduces cold calling or prospecting into something akin to a lucky numbers game. Nobody wants to hang their chances of success on luck, specifically a 3 to 4% chance of, success. And so they want to do it differently, or they want to call 1,000 people a day instead of 100 people a day, because volume will make up for that factor. But it all keeps coming back to context. If you want to change your percentage, if you want to win more than just the average people who are out there calling, you need to do things differently. If you cannot differentiate, you cannot sell. So I think people need to start talking about their prospects' problems, not about the products that they sell. Desmond, if you're my prospect and I know that you are struggling with getting your team's performance off the ground, your sales team is just not performing. They know the work to do. They just can't seem to do it. They're doing it, but they're getting average results and they're uninspired. And it's not going to be too long before they stop doing it altogether, or they just look for another opportunity with another company because the grass is always greener on the other side. These people who feel like they have to do it a certain way, but don't completely buy in or believe in the way they feel they have to do it. And so I'm going to acknowledge that problem. I'm going to say, Desmond, how are you handling your sales team's inspiration levels? Does your team really believe in what they're doing? Or are they just going through the motions? how do you bridge the gap? Desmond, as a leader, how have you helped people get from that state where they know what to do to the point where they're actually doing it and executing on it? Because right now, I will tell you that 30 to 50% of your team is not doing the work that they know how to do. You and I both know it. So how are you going to approach that? And I believe that questions start conversations and statements tend to end them. So if I want to start a conversation, I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask a question of you if you pick up the phone. I'm going to ask a question of you if you don't pick up the phone. I'm going to leave that in a voicemail. I'm going to ask you a question in an email. I'm going to send you a social media message after we connect, and I'm going to ask you a similar question. And the concept that people miss as part of creating context is creating tension. You need to create tension in order for anybody to do anything. The tension is this group of emotions that causes you to do something, right? It's the emotions that are necessary in order to make a sale. It's the emotions that are necessary in order for you to take that first meeting. But I'm going to start creating tension by asking questions that deserve answers. When a question deserves an answer and you don't answer it, you're like, yeah, but that one deserves, okay, that's fine. And you'll ignore the first three. And by the fourth one, you say, wow, this guy's not giving up. And by the fifth one, you say, this guy's not giving up. And these questions are really worth asking. So you know what? The next time, I'm probably gonna respond. And so you create the tension in order to get that first meeting. Then you continue creating that tension throughout the process. And that tension also goes hand in hand with creating the context for why you're creating a soft landing place for your recommendation. I don't like to call them pitches, your recommendation to land. Because when you've created enough tension, when you've created enough context, when you've earned the right to have this conversation about your prospect's problem, when you become someone worth talking to because you have something worth talking about, your pitch becomes a recommendation. And when you're the clear expert, when you are the clear choice to move forward, that 20% price difference doesn't matter. Because all the other ones all your competitors who haven't differentiated themselves, who are all selling for, let's just make the math easy, for $100 and you're selling for $120, they're all the same. That additional 20%, that additional $20 in that hypothetical case is insurance that I'm going to get this problem solved. It's the certainty, it's the safety, it's the level of comfort that I'm making the right decision. Yeah, I know this guy's 20% more expensive, and I know we don't have that in the budget. No one's got what you sell in the budget. Don't let them lie. But you got the money. And this problem is significant enough for us to solve. It's urgent enough for us to solve right now. This is, despite the fact that it's more expensive, this feels like it is the most certain way to not only solve the problem that we have now, but to prevent some future problems. We're going to find the money. We're going to make it happen. So and I illustrated a lot of the sales process there. We went from the first call all the way through, but it's really hard to extricate any one of those elements from the overall process. But you got to start creating tension from the beginning. You have to realize first and foremost that you need to create tension at all. If people are taking your call just because they're nice, dude, that's the wrong reason for them to listen to you. Again, you're getting into just the luck factor of it. And hey, you got to work hard to get lucky. And if you don't make that call, then that person's not going to give you a shot. But why are people taking your call? Is it because they believe you're someone worth talking to? Or is it because, well, the phone rang? I mean, which one is going to increase your odds? Because again, we're talking about increasing our odds over and above the mean, the average. Because if all we're going to do is average work, the robots can do that for us. We're already getting those calls. We're already getting those emails. You know what I mean? So at some point you have to separate yourself from the pack. And that means, going back to it, selling like you. Doing it the way only you can. Bringing your gifts, bringing your talents, bringing that special something that makes an impact.
Man, I'm about to go grab my sword and shield and get back in the trenches, man. I come out of retirement after that was gold. Man, that was good stuff. I like that. What landed for me big time was asking questions that they have to answer, like that are worth answering.
They're worth answering. Yeah.
And that hit, it's like, man, like don't ask these small talk kind of questions. Hey, how's your quarter going? How's your quarter coming along or whatever? Like that landed. And those questions probably are going to be different for everyone, depending on what industry, what business, what, what their, the customer journey is, right? Because a tech company is going to have entirely different sales process than a manufacturing company, right?
Because they solve different problems.
Yep, solve way different problems.
Again, the I didn't mean to interrupt your flow there, but the problem you solve dictates the questions you ask. And, I like to ask, how have you handled this? Because it can only be answered in 4 different ways. So I'm still controlling the conversation by asking questions, right? So how have you handled this? Well, we used to have that problem. We succeeded in solving it. So that's one way. Okay, we acknowledge the problem and we've acknowledged the solution. All right, you're probably not going to buy anything from me, but I'm interested in hearing what your best practice was so that I can learn something. So that's still probably a conversation I'm going to ask for and win. Or I'm not going to win the conversation, but I'll earn the conversation. I'll get the meeting booked. That's a good sales call, believe it or not. I believe anytime I get a chance to learn something, it's a win because it'll help prepare me for other calls in the future. So probably not going to make a sale, but I'm at least going to get the conversation. The second way is I know we have this problem, but we don't know how to fix it. Okay, maybe it's not urgent enough, but at least I know that there's a problem to be solved there. And if I can demonstrate that I'm worth talking to because I have that issue to discuss, then I'll probably win that meeting as well. And we can talk about the timing. We can talk about, whether or not this can be a real prospect for me. The third way is, I didn't know that problem existed until you brought it up. And yeah, as a matter of fact, we do have that issue. That puts me in a very strong position because now I've brought them the information. So now I know more than they do. They recognize that I know more than they do, and my status in their heads is immediately elevated. Wow, this is really someone who gets it in a way that we don't. We like the way this person thinks about things and approaches things. Maybe we don't like the news that they gave us, but this is clearly someone who has some expertise. That is, I think, probably the best way for them to answer is, I don't know I have this problem yet, which means you're ahead of their buying cycle and everything else. You are leading the conversation. And then the last way is, no, we don't have this problem, or yeah, I guess we have this problem, but we really don't care about it. Well, you can't win them all. They can't all be zingers, right? So you just chalk that up as part of the process, and you move right along. But being problem centric, right, is the biggest thing, because it doesn't matter if you're in tech. It doesn't matter if you sell a solution in multiple verticals. I am industry agnostic. I don't have an industry vertical that I sell into because I believe that all sales are made in this way. And in some ways that makes it tougher for me to position myself in the market. Some tech companies want a tech expert. Some manufacturing companies want a manufacturing expert. Okay, that's fine. I speak sales, and there are a lot of people out there who don't speak it as well. So, here we are. So I wanted to highlight that too. I mean, as you were moving up.
Nah, man, you're on fire. Super, super valuable. I love how you said I can learn from you, because I think that's like a money situation, because that's a relationship. Boom. I think the social capital is worth it, because who are they going to, if someone in their immediate network has a problem, who are they going to go to? Like, hey, right. I met this sharp kid, or, this one guy, they're doing XYZ. Let me make a referral. Boom. Also, I'm a big fan of the people who, obviously the people in the middle, that's clear, but the people who say, I don't know, I have this problem. Those are the perfect people I'll throw into an awareness cycle. Hey, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm just going to propaganda you with content, right? Until, you're ready to have that conversation, the marketing team. So all that stuff was super, super valuable. I think this episode was sick, man. So before we wrap up, just kind of give the audience an idea of where they can find you, what kind of services that you offer, just like real quick, if they want to learn more about what Jeff does and how Jeff can help them supercharge their sales and their sales team?
You can find me at jeffbajorek.com. You can find me at LinkedIn, Jeff Bajorek. My podcast is called Rethink the Way You Sell. That's my trademark. And I think I've established that I help people think differently about how they create results for other people. So if you Google my name, you will find a lot. I think between my podcast, the podcast I had for 5 years with my friend Christy Walters called The Why and the Buy, and the hundreds of other podcast episodes I've been on. I'm probably 1,300 podcast episodes in under my belt. So it's not hard for people to find me. But I work with companies on a training basis. I do workshops. I do sales kickoffs. I do some business consulting. I mean, where if you've got a people problem, I believe you've got a sales problem. And I do help from an advisory standpoint as well. But most of what I do is workshops and training and sales kickoffs. So happy to do those in person, virtually, whatever. But if you want to get a feel for how what it's like to work with me, then just get a hold of me. Reach me through LinkedIn, and we'll set something up.
Boom. This was, once again, money, and all those links will be in the show notes. Definitely go check Jeff out. We love talking about sales here at the Campfire, and we appreciate you for giving us some game and dropping your knowledge, man.
Thank you. When are we going to talk about capitalism?
That was the underlying. That was some underlying like sneaky capitalism. That was some sneaky capitalism. The whole episode.
That's funny. Thanks for having me, Desmond.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Congratulations. You made it to the end. Once again, I'm so grateful that you just gave us your most precious resource on the planet, which is your time. And we're extremely grateful. So if you're driving right now, don't click those links. Wait till you get to your destination and check Jeff out, and come back to the next Campfire. Cheers.